What if I told you that the rosary hanging quietly in your home right now could be the hidden source of tension, conflict, or unrest that you cannot explain? This is not superstition, and it is not fear meant to disturb you. This warning comes from the spiritual insight of Padre Pio, a man known for seeing what most people cannot perceive. Not long ago, a woman shared a troubling story. Her family had been falling apart in ways that made no sense. Arguments erupted daily over small things. Financial struggles appeared without warning, and even strange health issues began affecting members of her household. Doctors could not find clear answers, and despite prayer, nothing seemed to improve. Then something unexpected happened. After watching a message about spiritual discernment, she decided to examine a decorative rosary hanging in her bedroom. It was an old black rosary she had purchased from an estate sale, chosen simply because it looked beautiful and unique. Within days of removing that rosary from her home, everything began to change. The tension slowly lifted, conversations became calmer, and an unexplainable heaviness seemed to disappear. What she experienced was not coincidence, but something far deeper, something Padre Pio had warned about years ago, but that many people still ignore today. Padre Pio, known for his extraordinary spiritual gifts, taught that certain objects, even those that appear sacred, can carry influences that are not from God. Among these, he spoke specifically about rosaries, objects that are meant to be instruments of prayer, but in some cases can become something entirely different. He warned that certain rosaries, especially those in specific colors, could act not as channels of grace, but as conduits for spiritual disturbance. What makes this even more unsettling is that these rosaries are often the most attractive ones. They are the ones that catch your eye in stores or online, the ones that feel unique, rare, or special. And yet, hidden behind their beauty, there may be a history or purpose that you would never suspect. Today, you are about to discover exactly which types of rosaries Padre Pio warned against, why they can affect your home in ways you may not recognize, and the signs that something is not right. One of these types has become increasingly common in modern homes, making this message more urgent than ever. Before we go deeper, take a moment to reflect. Look around your home, especially your prayer space. Is there anything there that you have never questioned? Something you assumed was harmless simply because it looked religious? Because after what you are about to hear, you may never look at your rosary the same way again. To understand why this warning matters so deeply, you must first understand the true nature of the rosary. It is not just a collection of beads strung together in a traditional pattern. It is not a decoration, nor a simple religious symbol. The rosary is a spiritual instrument of immense power, a channel of prayer that connects the human soul to heaven through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary and ultimately to Jesus Christ. Since its revelation to Saint Dominic in the 13th century, the rosary has been associated with countless moments of grace, conversion, and even miraculous interventions. Throughout history, it has been described as a spiritual weapon, not in a physical sense, but in its ability to protect, to strengthen faith, and to bring peace into the lives of those who use it with sincere devotion. This is precisely what makes it so significant, and also what makes it a target. Because anything that carries true spiritual power can also become a point of distortion. Throughout history, sacred objects have not only been used for their intended purpose, but have also been misused, altered, or even deliberately corrupted. Padre Pio often reminded those who came to him that the spiritual world is real, and that not everything that appears holy is truly aligned with God. He once described the devil as being limited, like a chained animal that cannot go beyond a certain distance, yet still capable of harm if one comes too close. This teaching was not meant to create fear, but to awaken awareness. It was a reminder that discernment is necessary, even in the presence of things that seem sacred. Padre Pio possessed an extraordinary gift that many witnessed during his lifetime. He could discern the spiritual condition of a person, and even more remarkably, he could sense the spiritual history of objects. Visitors who traveled to see him in San Giovanni Rotondo were often surprised when he refused to bless certain items they brought with them. In some cases, he would even tell them to remove the object immediately or destroy it. There is a striking account of a woman who approached him carrying what appeared to be a normal rosary. Before she could even explain why she had come, Padre Pio reacted strongly and told her to take it away. He explained that the object had not been made for prayer, but for something entirely different. Later, it was discovered that the rosary had been used in occult practices before being presented as a religious item. This reveals a critical truth that many people overlook today. In a world where religious items are mass-produced, sold online, and even used as fashion accessories, it becomes easy to forget that these objects are not just decorative. They are meant to be sacramentals, extensions of faith that carry spiritual meaning and purpose. When that purpose is altered, ignored, or replaced with something else, the object itself can no longer function in the way it was intended. Instead of becoming a channel of grace, it can become a source of confusion, distraction, or even disturbance. And this is exactly why Padre Pio gave specific warnings about certain rosaries. Because the danger is not always obvious. It does not announce itself loudly or dramatically. It often hides behind beauty, uniqueness, and the appearance of holiness. And unless you understand what to look for, you may never realize that something in your home is affecting your spiritual life. Now that you understand why the rosary holds such power and why it can also be misused, we can begin to uncover the first type that Padre Pio warned about, a type that many people unknowingly keep in their homes. The first type of rosary that Padre Pio warned about may surprise you, because at first glance, it appears completely ordinary. It is the black rosary, a type that many people own, often chosen for its elegance, simplicity, or even its sense of solemn beauty. In Catholic tradition, the color black can carry meaningful symbolism. It can represent mourning, repentance, and reflection. For this reason, not every black rosary is problematic. Padre Pio was very clear about this. The danger is not in the color itself, but in how that color has been used, and more importantly, the history behind certain objects. He observed that many black rosaries, especially those obtained from unknown or unreliable sources, had been previously used in practices that were not aligned with the Christian faith. Because black absorbs and conceals, it became a color often chosen in rituals that sought to hide intention or manipulate spiritual forces. And when an object is used in that way, it can retain what Padre Pio described as a kind of spiritual residue. There is a powerful account connected to this warning. A woman had been suffering for a long time from intense nightmares and a growing sense of despair that she could not explain. She prayed regularly, went to confession, and tried to remain faithful, yet her condition only worsened. Nothing seemed to bring relief. Eventually, she traveled to seek guidance from Padre Pio. When she arrived, before she could fully explain her situation, he asked her a question that seemed unrelated at first. He asked about a dark object she kept near her bed. The woman was surprised, but then she remembered. She had a black rosary, one she had found in an antique shop. She had chosen it because it looked unique, with a beautifully crafted crucifix, and she placed it beside her bed as a sign of devotion. Padre Pio immediately instructed her to remove it and not to keep it in her home. He explained that the rosary had not been dedicated to prayer in the way she believed. It had been used for something entirely different, something that left behind a spiritual influence that continued to affect her. Though she did not fully understand how this could be possible, she followed his guidance. Within a short time after removing the rosary, her nightmares stopped. The heavy feeling that had surrounded her began to fade, and her peace slowly returned. What changed was not her faith, because she had already been faithful. What changed was the presence of something that had been interfering with that faith. Padre Pio's ability to perceive this was not based on guesswork or imagination. It was a profound spiritual gift, one that allowed him to sense the unseen history of objects, especially those connected to prayer or spiritual activity. He could recognize when something carried a presence that did not belong. What made black rosaries particularly concerning in his teaching was not their appearance, but their capacity to conceal what had been done with them. An object can look perfectly normal, even beautiful, and still carry a past that affects the present. And because this influence is not visible, many people never think to question it. He explained that when such objects are used in environments of prayer, they can create what he described as spiritual interference. Instead of helping a person focus, they may subtly disturb concentration, create unease, or weaken the sense of peace that prayer is meant to bring. Over time, this interference can extend beyond prayer and begin to affect the atmosphere of the home itself. This is why the first warning is so important. Not every black rosary is dangerous, but any rosary with an unknown origin, especially one acquired from places like antique shops, estate sales, or informal markets, should be approached with caution, because what you see is not always the full story. And this is only the beginning. The second type that Padre Pio warned about is even more unsettling, because it involves a color that is deeply sacred, yet can also be deeply misused. The second type of rosary that Padre Pio warned about is even more unsettling, because it involves a color that is deeply sacred in Christian tradition, yet can also be dangerously misused. This is the blood red rosary, a form that many people would never suspect could carry any risk. In its true meaning, the color red represents the blood of Christ, sacrifice, love, and martyrdom. It is a powerful and holy symbol within the Catholic faith, one that reminds believers of redemption and divine mercy. But Padre Pio explains something that few people consider. A sacred symbol can be imitated, distorted, or repurposed in ways that strip it of its original meaning and redirect its spiritual intention. He made it clear that the issue is not the color red itself. Just like with black rosaries, the danger lies in the intention behind the object and the way it has been used before coming into your possession. Some rosaries, especially those with an intense, almost unnatural shade of red, have been associated with rituals that involve blood symbolism outside of Christian devotion. These practices take what is holy and reshape it into something entirely different. There is a deeply troubling case that illustrates this warning. A family began experiencing changes that they could not explain. The father, once calm and patient, started showing sudden bursts of anger. The teenage son struggled with severe insomnia, unable to rest peacefully at night. Their youngest child developed an unusual fear of certain parts of the house, refusing to enter rooms that once felt safe. At first, they believed these were ordinary problems, stress, or emotional struggles. But over time, the pattern became too consistent to ignore. Seeking guidance, they turned to Padre Pio. Before they could fully describe their situation, he asked them about a red object in their home, specifically something placed in their prayer space. The family was shocked. They remembered a decorative rosary, a deep red one, hanging prominently in their prayer area. It had been given to them as a gift, admired for its beauty and uniqueness. Padre Pio explained that this particular rosary had a history. It had been used in rituals that mixed Christian elements with other invocations, creating what he described as spiritual confusion. It was not purely dedicated to God, and because of that, it carried a divided intention that was now affecting the environment of their home. Following his advice, they removed the rosary and had their home blessed. The change was not immediate, but it was undeniable. Gradually, peace returned. The father regained his calmness, the son began to sleep normally again, and the atmosphere of fear disappeared. What had once felt heavy and tense became light and stable again. Padre Pio emphasized that objects like these do not create problems out of nothing. Instead, they amplify what already exists. Small frustrations become intense conflicts. Minor anxieties grow into persistent fear. It is a subtle influence, one that builds over time, making it difficult to trace back to its source. This is why the warning about red rosaries is so important. Because unlike darker or more unusual objects, these often appear deeply religious, even beautiful in a sacred way. And that is precisely what makes them harder to question. But there is still one more category that Padre Pio considered the most concerning in today's world. It is more common than ever, often sold openly and even promoted as something positive. Yet it carries a hidden danger that many fail to recognize. The third type of rosary that Padre Pio warned about is perhaps the most concerning in today's world, not because it looks dangerous, but because it often appears attractive, modern, and even spiritually inclusive. These are the multicolored rosaries made with unusual designs, symbols, or materials that go beyond traditional Catholic structure. At first glance, these rosaries may seem harmless or even beautiful. They often feature bright colors, decorative patterns, or elements that feel unique and artistic. Some include beads shaped like eyes, crystals believed to hold energy, or symbols taken from different spiritual traditions. They are frequently marketed as universal prayer beads, designed to connect multiple beliefs into one harmonious object. And this is exactly where the hidden danger begins. Padre Pio described these objects as sources of spiritual confusion, not because they are openly evil, but because they mix what should remain clear and focused. In the Christian faith, prayer is not a vague or undefined act. It is directed specifically to God through a clear spiritual path. The Rosary itself has a defined purpose, rooted in meditation on the life of Christ and guided by the intercession of the Virgin Mary. When elements from different belief systems are blended into that structure, something changes. The clarity of prayer becomes distorted. Instead of a direct connection, it becomes divided, scattered, and weakened. Padre Pio explained that this creates what he called a kind of spiritual interference, not unlike static that disrupts a clear signal. The intention may appear good, but the result becomes unfocused and unstable. In today's world, these hybrid rosaries have become increasingly common. They are sold online, displayed in shops, and even promoted as symbols of openness and unity. Some include crystals said to have healing properties, others incorporate signs from various religions, and some are designed purely for aesthetic appeal, turning a sacred object into something closer to a fashion accessory. This shift reflects a deeper issue that Padre Pio warned about long before it became widespread. When sacred objects lose their original purpose, they also lose their spiritual integrity. A rosary is not meant to be an ornament or a trend. It is meant to guide prayer, to focus the mind and heart, and to strengthen a person's relationship with God. When that purpose is replaced with decoration, symbolism from unrelated traditions, or personal customization that ignores its meaning, the object no longer serves the role it was created for. Instead, it introduces confusion into something that was meant to be clear and sacred. What makes this third category especially dangerous is how easily it is accepted. Unlike the black rosary or the deep red one, which may raise questions, these multicolored rosaries are often seen as positive or even spiritually advanced. People are drawn to them without hesitation, believing they are enhancing their faith, when in reality they may be weakening its foundation. Padre Pio warned that this kind of confusion is one of the most subtle forms of spiritual disruption. It does not create immediate fear or discomfort. Instead, it slowly shifts focus away from true devotion, making prayer feel less effective, less meaningful, and more distant over time. And yet, many people who experience these effects never connect them to the objects they are using. They assume the problem lies within themselves, never realizing that something external may be influencing their spiritual life. Now that you understand the three types of rosaries that require caution, the question becomes even more important. How can you recognize if a rosary in your possession is affecting you or your home in ways you have not yet noticed? Now that you understand the three types of rosaries that Padre Pio warned about, the next question becomes deeply personal. How can you recognize if a rosary in your possession is not bringing peace, but quietly causing disturbance in your spiritual life or even in your home? Padre Pio offered several signs, not as a way to create fear, but to guide discernment. The first sign often appears in your prayer life. You may find yourself feeling an unusual resistance when trying to pray. Even if your intention is sincere, something feels off. Your mind becomes distracted more easily, your focus weakens, and instead of peace, you feel restless or unsettled. It can feel like trying to move forward while something invisible is holding you back. The second sign is a subtle but persistent change in the atmosphere of your home. There may be tension that seems to arise without clear reason. Small disagreements turn into larger conflicts, and a sense of heaviness lingers in certain spaces. These moments may appear normal on the surface, but when they repeat consistently, they begin to form a pattern that is difficult to ignore. The third sign involves your rest. Sleep disturbances are often overlooked, yet they can be significant. You or members of your household may experience frequent nightmares, difficulty falling asleep, or waking up feeling exhausted without explanation. When these experiences begin to affect more than one person in the same home, it becomes something worth paying attention to. The fourth sign can often be observed in children or even animals. Padre Pio noted that children, because of their innocence, And animals, because of their sensitivity, may react more quickly to spiritual imbalance. A child who suddenly becomes fearful of a specific room, or a pet that avoids a certain area without clear cause, may be responding to something that others cannot easily perceive. The fifth sign is more internal and often harder to explain. It is a sense of unease that arises when you are near a particular object or when you use it in prayer. You may not understand why, and you may even try to ignore it, but the feeling persists. Padre Pio believed that these subtle interior reactions can sometimes be a form of guidance, something that should not be dismissed too quickly. The sixth and final sign is the overall effect on your spiritual life. A rosary is meant to draw you closer to God, to create clarity, peace, and devotion. But if you notice that using a specific rosary leads to avoidance, distraction, or a lack of desire to pray, then something is not functioning as it should. The very tool meant to strengthen your faith may instead be weakening your connection. What makes these signs so difficult to recognize is that each one can be explained in ordinary ways. Stress, fatigue, personal struggles, all of these can produce similar effects. And that is why many people never consider the possibility that an object in their environment could be contributing to what they are experiencing. Padre Pio emphasized that spiritual disturbance rarely appears in dramatic or obvious ways. It builds slowly, blending into everyday life until it feels normal. And by the time it becomes noticeable, it has already influenced multiple areas of a person's life. But recognizing these signs is only the beginning. Because once you become aware, you are faced with an important decision. What should you do if you suspect that something in your home is affecting your peace, your prayer, and your family without you even realizing it? What makes this entire situation even more unsettling is how quietly these influences can grow over time. Padre Pio explained that spiritual disturbance rarely enters a home in a dramatic way. It does not announce itself with something obvious or immediate. Instead, it begins subtly, almost invisibly, and then slowly expands until it affects the entire atmosphere of a household. There is a testimony that reflects this pattern with striking clarity. A woman named Martha had always lived in a peaceful home. Her family was close, their relationships were stable, and although they faced normal challenges, nothing ever seemed overwhelming. But over time, something began to change. Small disagreements started to happen more often. Conversations that were once calm became tense. Gradually, those small moments turned into constant friction that no one could fully explain. Alongside this tension, other problems began to appear. Financial difficulties emerged without any clear reason, despite careful planning and responsible decisions. Members of the family started feeling unusually tired, even after rest. Irritability became common, and a sense of emotional distance slowly replaced the warmth that once defined their home. None of these issues seemed connected at first. Each one appeared to have its own explanation. But as months passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. What had once been a harmonious household now felt heavy and unstable. It was as if something unseen was pressing down on every aspect of their lives. Desperate for answers, Martha reached out for spiritual guidance. When her situation was presented, the question she received in return was unexpected. She was asked whether she had recently brought any new religious objects into her home. At first, the question seemed unrelated, but then she remembered something she had almost forgotten. Not long before the changes began, she had purchased several rosaries from an estate sale. They were beautiful, unusual pieces, each one different in color and design. She had placed them throughout her home, thinking they would serve as reminders to pray. Following the guidance she received, she removed those rosaries and replaced them with simple ones obtained from a trusted religious source, properly blessed and used with intention. What happened next was gradual, but undeniable. The tension began to ease. Conversations softened. The sense of heaviness lifted, and the emotional connection within the family slowly returned. Even their financial situation began to stabilize over time. Padre Pio explained this kind of situation in a way that is both simple and profound. These objects do not create problems out of nothing. Instead, they magnify what is already present. A small weakness becomes a larger struggle. A minor disagreement becomes a repeated conflict. It is like a lens that intensifies what would otherwise remain manageable. This is why their presence is so difficult to identify. because everything that happens still feels human, still feels natural. There is no clear sign pointing directly to an external cause, and yet the effect is real, shaping the environment in ways that are deeply felt but rarely understood. Understanding this pattern is essential because it shifts the way you see your surroundings. It invites you to look beyond what is visible and consider that not everything affecting your life can be explained in ordinary terms. But awareness alone is not enough. Once you recognize the possibility that something in your home may be contributing to this kind of disturbance, the next step becomes crucial. What actions should you take to restore peace, clarity, and protection? Once again, Padre Pio did not leave people in uncertainty when it came to what should be done. His guidance was not based on fear, but on clarity, balance, and practical action rooted in faith. If you begin to suspect that a rosary or any religious object in your home may not be what it appears to be, the first step is not panic, but awareness. He advised starting with a careful and honest examination of the religious items in your home. Look at each rosary with attention. Ask simple but important questions. Where did this come from? Who gave it to me? Was it purchased from a trusted religious source? Or was it found, gifted, or bought simply because it looked appealing? This step is not about suspicion, but about understanding the origin and intention behind what you possess. If a rosary appears normal but comes from an uncertain source, Padre Pio recommended something very simple. Have it blessed by a priest. This act is not symbolic. It is a real spiritual reconsecration, returning the object to its proper purpose. Many people overlook this step, assuming that all rosaries are automatically sacred, but blessing is what aligns the object fully with its role in prayer. However, if a rosary creates a strong sense of discomfort or clearly fits into one of the concerning categories, black with unknown origin, intense blood red, or multicolored with unusual elements, then a different approach is needed. Padre Pio advised bringing such objects to a priest who understands spiritual discernment. In some cases, the object may be blessed. In others, it may be recommended that it not be kept at all. He was also very clear about something many people misunderstand. Simply throwing these objects away is not the proper solution. Because they are still religious items, even if compromised, they should be treated with respect. The correct way to dispose of them, if necessary, is through burning or burying, accompanied by prayer. This returns the object to the elements in a way that acknowledges its nature while removing its presence from your environment. But Padre Pio did not focus only on removing what is harmful. He emphasized replacing it with what is right. When choosing a rosary, he encouraged simplicity. A rosary made of wood, glass, or simple metal, obtained from a trusted religious source, carries a purity of intention that is far more important than appearance. What matters is not how unique or beautiful it looks, but how faithfully it serves its purpose. He also recommended having your home blessed, especially if you have experienced ongoing disturbance. This is not an extreme action. It is a way of restoring spiritual order, inviting peace back into your space. Alongside this, he encouraged establishing a dedicated place for prayer, a space that is calm, intentional, and centered on God. One of his most practical teachings was the idea of creating a spiritual shield within the home. This does not involve anything complicated. A blessed crucifix, holy water, and a properly blessed rosary placed in meaningful locations can help establish an environment of prayer and protection. But again, the power does not come from the objects alone. It comes from the faith with which they are used. Because in the end, Padre Pio always returned to one essential truth. Objects can assist, but they do not replace devotion. They can support prayer, but they cannot create it. Everything depends on the intention of the heart. And this leads to the most important understanding of all, one that brings everything together and removes any fear that may have arisen from these warnings. As we reach the end of this message, it is important to return to the central truth that Padre Pio wanted every believer to understand. These warnings were never meant to create fear, anxiety, or suspicion toward every object in your home. They were meant to awaken discernment, to remind you that your spiritual life is real and that what surrounds you can either support it or quietly interfere with it. The rosary, when used as it was intended, remains one of the most powerful tools of prayer ever given to the faithful. It is a path that leads the heart into deeper reflection on the life of Christ, guided through the intercession of the Virgin Mary. Its strength does not come from the material it is made of, nor from its color or design. Its strength comes from the sincerity of the person who holds it, the faith that gives it meaning, and the grace of God that flows through it. Padre Pio made it clear that no object, no matter its past, has power greater than God. This is where peace replaces fear. Even if something in your home has carried a negative influence, it does not have the final word. Faith, prayer, and proper action are always stronger. When you align yourself with God, when you act with clarity and intention, anything that does not belong will lose its hold. At the same time, he reminded people that faith is not passive. It requires attention, care, and sometimes correction. Examining the rosaries in your home, ensuring they come from trustworthy sources, and having them properly blessed are not acts of fear. They are acts of respect toward your spiritual life. They are small decisions that protect something far greater, your connection with God. In a world where sacred things are often turned into trends, decorations, or accessories, this message becomes even more relevant. The rosary is not meant to be displayed without purpose or collected for appearance. It is meant to be used, prayed with, and held with reverence. When it is treated this way, it becomes what it was always meant to be, a lifeline between your heart and heaven. If something in this message has stirred your attention, do not ignore it. Take a moment to reflect on your home, your prayer life, and the objects you keep close to you. Sometimes the smallest change can restore a peace you did not realize you had lost. And if this message has spoken to you, share it with someone who may need to hear it. Because there are many people living with confusion, tension, or spiritual dryness without ever considering that the answer might be closer than they think. May your home be filled with peace, your prayer be clear and steady, and your faith remain strong and protected. And may you always remember the true power of the rosary is not in what you see, but in the grace that flows through it when it is used with a sincere and faithful heart.